Turkish Airlines presents Business Africa.
Hello and welcome to this new edition of Business Africa. I'm Dayoka, the top stories. The annual meetings of the IMF and the World Bank Group in Marrakesh tackled climate financing and reform. These themes are issues directly affecting Africa. Several countries on the continent are facing a debt crisis and the repercussions of global warming. In Kenya, actors of the leather industry want to improve the sector's performance and have called on the government. Among other things, they want imports of end products made from leather to be limited in order to stimulate growth in the sector. Finally, we head to Nigeria, where aquaculture is demonstrating its huge potential for creating businesses and jobs. Africa was at the center of many conversations at the annual meetings of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank Group. African countries grappling with crises are calling for more action and more reforms.
50 years after holding their last annual meetings on the continent, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund (IMF) returned to Africa for their Marrakesh meeting under the theme of reform and climate financing. Unsurprisingly, Africa was at the heart of many of the discussions, confronted as it is with the debt crisis affecting several of the continent's countries, the consequences of global warming, and poverty that is reducing less rapidly than elsewhere. At a time when the Bretton Woods institutions are facing a growing chorus of criticism over the underrepresentation of low-income countries in their decision-making processes, the IMF and the World Bank have announced plans to grant Africa additional seats on their boards. However, analysts believe this does not do much, as many African countries need greater access to public and private financing and debt relief. Of the 39 countries covered by the IMF World Bank Joint Debt Sustainability Framework for low-income nations, 10 African countries are already in debt distress, and a further 12 are at a high risk of debt distress. Africa is also much more vulnerable to the effect of climate change. While the continent offers promising opportunities for ecological transition, the current financial system does not seem to be working in their favor.
What is the IMF doing to help African countries at high risk of debt distress, and is there access to climate funds? Abebe Amera Selassie is the director of the IMF's Africa Department. He joins us this week for more details. Welcome to Business Africa, sir. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva recently called for greater cooperation between developed and developing countries. African leaders on their part continue to demand better representation in international financial institutions. What are your thoughts on this?
First, I think cooperation is imperative because many of the challenges that countries face need to be resolved jointly. The IMF, what we argue for, first and foremost, and have been doing, of course, has been providing a lot of financing. We've also created new facilities like the Resilience Sustainability Trust. And then third, of course, over and above this, to the extent that, the members who control the IMF want to pursue other ways in which we can support our countries, we would, of course, be very, very happy as staff to work and make sure that we deliver on that.
African economies are faced with numerous unfulfilled financial commitments. What is the IMF doing to simplify their access to new climate funds?
So just to be very clear, the IMF has a particular mandate, which is to provide financing, balance payments types of financing, external financing to government. And that's what we're doing. We've provided just in the last 2.5 years, of the order of $60 billion in financing just for sub-Saharan Africa. Now, specific project-type financing is done by other institutions, multilateral banks and others. And of course, this is not something that we're engaged in, but we provide the resources, of course, governments need to invest in, all of the initiatives that they have.
As you know, lack of financing and inflation have worsened other ongoing crises on the continent, such as the debt crisis. Is the IMF ready to take additional measures to alleviate African debt, such as reducing surcharges?
Now, in terms of debt, of course, there are a number of countries, 7 or 8 countries, where debt is clearly unsustainable, and they need debt reprofiling. But this assessment of debt, whether a country's debt is sustainable or not, is a country-specific issue. Chad was one of the first countries that, like a couple of years ago, was assessed to have its debt in an unsustainable situation. It has, worked with its creditors and we provided the economic analysis. More recently, Zambia has had reached understanding with its authorities, and we're very, very hopeful that the deal with official creditors will be signed imminently. Again, the same process is in train in Ghana. So, the vast majority of countries in sub-Saharan Africa borrow from the Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust, which is a zero interest rate facility. So the surcharges do not apply here except for a couple of middle income countries. And we are absolutely determined to make sure that, we raise enough funds for that facility. So continue to provide the financing that our countries need to support the reforms countries are doing. And that is one of the big issues that's being discussed this time. And we're very hopeful that the membership will come up with the required resources that will allow us to increase access, to provide more financing in the coming months.
Sir Bebe Selassie, thank you for your insight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
The leather industry is one of the most resilient sectors of the Kenyan economy, but the country is not taking full advantage of the opportunities it offers. In this report, we zoom in on solutions local manufacturers have suggested to improve the performance of the industry.
A recent report by the Kenyan Association of Manufacturers revealed the leather industry to be one of the oldest and most resilient sectors of the local economy. However, it is currently underperforming and has gone from being a net producer of foreign currency to a net consumer of foreign currency. Industry players have urged the government to implement policies to stimulate growth, but results have been inconclusive.
Instead of government doing what is promising us, there are some people behind there who actually are destroying the leather industry. And I don't really understand when they say Kenya should be a manufacturing country. Well, on the other hand, they are busy allowing the release of raw material from the country. We cannot produce, we cannot expand when we don't have a raw material.
Mr. Njoka maintains that there is great growth potential for the leather industry, but only if the government is sincere in creating an enabling environment. Wallace Kamau, a leather goods manufacturer in Nairobi, agrees support from the authorities is essential.
Kenyans have started to appreciate locally made products, and definitely with the decline of importation of finished leather product, we definitely have an increase on our side, enabling us to create more employment opportunities and also be able to produce more.
Over a month ago, the government promised to limit imports of finished leather products, but professionals remain skeptical.
But I wonder how it is going to be implemented. One thing I give credit to this government, they moved the duty of leather and leather goods from 25% to 35%, or $10, whichever is high. That is a plus.
A study by Kenya's Institute for Public Policy Research and Analysis shows that the value of Kenya's leather trade remains low, despite the country being Africa's 5th largest livestock producer.
With an estimated annual production of 1 million tons in 2021, Nigeria is the world's largest producer of African catfish. To promote a sustainable industry, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization has drawn up an ambitious plan. Take a look.
In Nigeria, aquaculture is showing its huge potential for creating businesses and jobs. Demand for aquatic foods is high in Africa's most populous country, where fish accounts for 37% of animal protein intake. A recent analysis of the Nigerian catfish sector by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization showed just how important it is, estimating the value of annual catfish production at some $2.6 billion. Nuruddin Kadri, a 38-year-old fish farmer, runs a fish farm in southwest Nigeria. With an annual production of almost 50 tons, he says that catfish farming is the best option for him.
It's a very profitable business, and that is the only business I'm doing, and it's giving me money at least to sustain myself and my family.
Nigeria is already the world's largest producer of African catfish, but the overall volume of production could be even higher, according to experts. With the Fish 4 ACP program, the FAO and its partners have set themselves a goal to improve the sector's productivity and competitiveness in order to make catfish farming more sustainable in both socio-economic and environmental terms.
The current production levels are potentially 3 to 4 times higher than was previously thought. So potentially we're talking about a really huge sector, which would make the Nigerian catfish sector one of the largest in sub-Saharan Africa.
According to the FAO, the catfish sector in Nigeria provides employment for around 1 million people in the country, 285,000 of whom are producers.
That does it for this week's Business Africa. The news continues on Africanews.com and on all our platforms. I'll see you soon.
Business Africa was presented by Turkish Airlines.